So at the beginning, it's usual to either say prayers or set motivation. I don't think we need to say any prayers, but I mean, as for motivation, motivation is like, why am I listening? Why am I having this discussion? I mean, and I think it's maybe it's quite easy to say I'm doing this for all sentient beings, but I mean, all sentient beings is quite a lot, right? I mean, to conceive of all, have a conception, kind of a conception of all living sentient beings is quite difficult. And I think it can become a little bit sort of passé, you know, after a while. I'm doing this for all sentient beings, but I think what I find is useful is if I'm listening to someone or having a discussion, is to listen with a sensible and honest, open mind, with a kind of desire that I might be able to somehow expand my own realm of knowledge, which in turn will be of benefit or to others, to other people. So I think, we sort of listen with an attempt to somehow make our mind bigger. Learning is, or learning knowledge is something that, we should always do. Shakya Pandita, he said, even if you're going to die tomorrow, you should study today. I don't know whether I could do that, but that's what he said. So, I mean, discussion, and sometimes, I think we listen, especially if we listen today, for example, to say a politician who we don't like, we don't agree with their policies, then it's sometimes just like whatever they say, we've already decided that I'm going to find fault with it. And that's a bit like the, there are these three pots, and the three pots you should have when you listen to anything: a pot that has no holes in it, a pot that's not upside down, and a pot that's not unclean or dirty. So I think in any discussion anywhere, I think that should be, that's a good motivation, that you listen sensibly and honestly. I mean, as adults, as we should do. Yeah, and I was asked to teach first Tantra, but I'm a little wary of going straight into that, into Tantra. Tantra is secret for a reason. It's not secret because Vajradhara didn't want anyone to know about it, or he wanted tantric practitioners need to keep it for themselves. It's not because of that. I suspect that in ancient India, when Tantra was practiced, it was practiced in the forests, away from the towns, secretly, because of all the sort of practices in it that can be so easily misconstrued. And so I think we can talk about Tantra, but later. But I thought need to sort of lead up to Tantra. Tantra is described as, practice of Tantra has been described as like being a snake in a tube, right? A snake in a tube, right? A snake in a tube is only one way to go, right? So you can't turn back. It's quite a commitment, It's just, Ling Rinpoche, he said, practicing Tantra is like being a snake in a tube. So it's quite something as a practice. So I think maybe a good idea to just look at the sort of reasons why we practice Tantra. So I called it from faith to Tantra, because I thought we'd start with faith, and we think about faith and what it is. Well, what is faith? And I mean, in general, in the language, in English, we often use faith to equate with religion. We say Jewish faith, Muslim faith. It equates with a religion, but that's not really the case. in Buddhism. You can't say, you can say Buddhist faith, but it doesn't really, you can't say Buddhism is a faith, but you need faith to practice Buddhism. So why faith is important is that it is a motivator. It is something that will drive you forward, because faith has a nature of belief. It has a nature of belief and a nature of trust, at least. That's one type of faith. It has a nature of trust and a nature of belief. And therefore it has as its object something that you want to be a part of, or you want to gain, or you want to benefit from. There is that object there. So that faith really needs to be solid and unshakable, insofar as that it will not be driven off course by someone or another view, or someone who comes along and posits another view. I mean, I think, in the world that we live in, or with a plethora of views, scientific and other religious views and atheistic views, there are, if we listen to all of them, and in one sense we should listen to all of them, but if we listen to all of them and just let them sort of overwhelm us without our own faith sort of firmly developed, then doubts start to appear. And I know, Westerners who studied in India in the 70s and 80s, and later on they think, well, maybe this, maybe that. So, it's not something that is out beyond the realms of possibility. And so, a doubt is important. A doubt is very, very important. There's a saying in Tibetan: if you have no doubt, you're either enlightened or you're stupid. You're what is one of those two, right? If you have no doubts at all, then you're enlightened, because an enlightened being is there are no veils or coverings over their cognition, so everything is clear to them. Or if you're stupid, means that you just, you don't think about things at all. You just have no thoughts. You have no analytical sort of prowess at all. But I think for most of us, we have doubts. So doubts are, it's not that doubt should be replaced with some kind of blind faith, that you kick doubt out of the window and then you replace it with some kind of now I believe. And because I want to believe, I want to be part of something. And this looks to me as if it would be something I could belong to, and I need as a part of my identity. Therefore, I will believe. I think that's on the road. That's putting yourself on the road to disaster, because eventually the cracks will appear. But it's no doubt. I mean, it's obviously that faith on its own has a nature of not knowing, in a sense that you believe in something that you haven't actually experienced, in terms of it appearing in front of you, like the full moon in the sky. There is an element of trust, right? There is an element of trust, and there is a faith, which is the faith of trust and the faith of belief, especially when it comes to things like past and future lives, and the existence of a Buddha, an enlightened being, especially in the Mahayana, existence of an enlightened being with all these fantastic qualities. I mean, I remember once I was in a conference and someone was talking about the Buddha, and I don't know how the subject came up, but he mentioned that the Buddha can speak in all languages simultaneously, and everything he says will be understood by all living beings. And he said it as if, and everyone, and as if, yeah. There's a kind of, well, yeah, almost like that's what it says. But really, I mean, how is that possible? How can you speak in all languages at the same time? If you think about it, I mean, sometimes I can't even speak my own language properly. To speak all languages of the world at the same time in a manner that beings will not only hear, but will be attracted to. It just seems some kind of hyperbole, right? But it can be, these things can be, these can be proven, they can be established. We don't go into why right now, but they can be. They're, you know, if it can't be, if there is no way of establishing or proving that, then, well, we don't have to accept it. So I think very much faith has to be based upon common sense and reasoning, by seeing the reasonings behind something. And so there are three kinds of faith. This first kind of faith is just called trust, you know, a faith of belief, of trusting that there are such things as past and future lives, that there are Buddhas with these miraculous powers. But how do you possibly make that leap? We talk about a leap of faith, don't we? A leap of faith. But I don't think in Buddhism there is a leap of faith. I think there's a gradual unfolding and a gradual penetration of the hidden sort of realities in our own mind and outside our mind, which is eventually sort of contacted through the power of our mind, the power of our intellect, the power of our reasoning, the power of our perceptiveness, our discernment. That's all we have. You know, as human beings, we have that. It's one of the things that sets us aside from maybe other creatures like animals. So it's a shame that we shouldn't make use of it. So the power of reasoning in order to understand something means simply to take an object, take a subject in your mind and examine it as much as possible through reasoning. If this is so, that is so, you know. If it doesn't stack up, you don't have to accept it. Why should you? I mean, in Buddhism, something that exists, the definition of existence is that which can be cognized correctly, that which can be validly cognized. If it exists, it can be known. It's not there is something that exists that can't be known. If it can't be known, it doesn't exist. If it exists, it can be known, right? So the next question is, what do you mean by know? What do you mean by know? I mean, you know, there may be, I was watching a program last night about Stonehenge. You know Stonehenge, right? Stonehenge and these great Neolithic stones in Salisbury. You know, where did they come from, and what were they doing there, and how? Because they're not native to the area. They are only native in Wales, which is 500 miles. But how did they get these gigantic stones from Wales to here, and why did they move them? So a lot of conjecture, and ultimately, of course, you can't say really. I mean, unless you have evidence, and it's very difficult for them to say it could be this, it could be that. Yeah, but that's not always the case when you are examining the sort of realities of the mind and so forth. And what we have in us at all times is this continuation or this continuum of consciousness. It is there at all times. Maybe when you're sleeping, it's a little bit dormant, but you know, it's mostly there, right? This is what we as human beings or any beings experience for ourselves. My experience of my mind is not your experience of your mind. It will be personal. We have that, right? And for us to know whether or not this mind or this consciousness can continue without this body, without this sort of support to the body, and whether it can develop and flower into a consciousness that knows all things and can speak all languages to all beings at all times. We need to understand what it is. If we understand an acorn, we can understand an oak tree. If we understand the cause, we can understand the effect. Clearly, people predict things that are going to happen by looking at the causes. I mean, even the weather is predicted because there is this cold front out here, or this isobar out there, or whatever. And by looking at the causes, they predict what is going to happen. Therefore, the idea that the Buddha, the Buddha is some creature, no, is some being unconnected with us in some far off realm up there somewhere that we pray to, is not the way to look at the Buddha. It's not the way to look at the Buddha. In Buddha nature literature, such as the Uttara Tantra, which talks about the Tathagata essence, it says that we all belong to one family, the Buddha family. Sangha-girik, we belong to the Buddha family. Why is that? What does that mean? It means that the enlightened mind in it past, stretches way back to sort of ordinary times before the Buddha was enlightened. There are many stories of Buddha's past lives, Jataka tales, and whether they are true or not, I don't know. Dalai Lama, he said, every New Year, oh, Happy New Year, everybody, Happy Losar. He said, every Losar, I read it's custom to read the Jataka tales, the tales of the past lives of the Buddha in the temple. He says, I do that. He says, but I find them a bit boring. He said, I'd rather be reading Nagarjuna or something, or something that But anyway, that's the point. The point is that it indicates that the Buddha was not always a Buddha. He had a path and a journey which ended in enlightenment. So even if you don't believe that, if we look at our nature of our own consciousness, the nature of our own mind, we can see quite clearly that there are consciousnesses that come and go. Our sensory consciousness, sometimes there's, if we close our eyes, we don't see. If we close our ears, we don't hear. When we are sleeping, we don't experience anything through the five consciousness. They're there sometimes and they're not there sometimes, but there's something that's always there. There is a stream, isn't there? If there wasn't a stream, you wouldn't wake up in the morning. And you wouldn't really wake up in the morning because there has to be something there. And if you say, oh, well, that's the neurons or the synapses, the neuron pathways, which is a scientific explanation. Well, that's another, we don't want to go there, but that's another sort of argument, because in Buddhist terms, that which is consciousness cannot be created from that which is matter. It's like this sort of trying to say fire is created from ice, or fire or water is created from solid. I mean, it's incompatible. The causes are incompatible. So there has to be something. There's a kind of a mental continuum of consciousness. And in Tantra, I'm going to Tantra now, in Tantra, that consciousness is not reduced. That consciousness is pared down to its very subtle level. A subtle level of consciousness is one which is completely divorced from the sensory consciousness. It is not virtuous, it's not non-virtuous. It is a continual, subtle stream. People will call this the primordial consciousness. Some in Nyingma they call it, the Samanta Badara, Rigpa, many different. Sometimes the foundation consciousness, Buddha nature. There are many names, but they all come down to this one thing, and it is this consciousness, this subtle consciousness, with which you practice Tantra, not generation stage Tantra, but completion stage Tantra, And if, even though now we can't activate it or actualize it, if its existence can be inferred, right, then we can infer its continuation, right? Its continuation, because it doesn't necessarily have any sensory parts to it. It doesn't have to depend upon, these 5 sensory organs. And when you talk about the bodily, the physical sense power, it's the whole body, really. The whole body, except for the hair and the nails, the whole body is said to be the physical or the bodily power. So that's everything. I mean, that's us, and everything. So if the body goes when it goes at the end of our life, there is no reason why that subtle consciousness should continue, because it doesn't depend upon this coarse form. In Tantra, it depends upon subtle winds that carry it. That's true. And in Tantra, this subtle consciousness can be utilized, and it can be transformed into the path. Tantra talks about taking death into the path. The death, bardo, and rebirth, taken into the 3 bodies of the Buddha. So it's, I think, understanding the nature of the mind is a very good way to understand how the life consciousness can continue. The other thing to understand about the consciousness is that by its nature, it doesn't really have any kind of inseparable union with all our ignorance and our anger and our desire. It is not inseparably joined to it. It may appear so. When we get angry, it takes over our entire consciousness and even our own body. We go red and everything. And it appears very much so that my mind and the anger are like the flame and the heat. They are one. But if that was so, we'd always be angry. Sometimes we're not angry. Sometimes we're calm, quite even. Sometimes we're calm. Sometimes we're loving. Sometimes we're resentful. Sometimes we are content. And sometimes we want, right? So, but throughout all this, there is a continuation, In the Dzogchen texts, in the Nyingma texts, they talk very much about the innate Rigpa, or the innate sort of primordial consciousness that exists throughout all our states of mind, all of them, no matter what they are. It's there always, always. It's just in the same way that, through all the different matter, there are particles and atoms throughout. And so it seems that by understanding that and realizing or inferring that consciousness is actually, its nature is a kind of clarity. There's a kind of clarity about it. It's like the sky. the sky and the clouds are not the sky. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains. It's there. It's there. The clouds are there because of the sky. The sky allows the clouds to come in and go. Likewise, the consciousness allows our emotions to come and to go. They say mind is like a mirror. Whatever you hold up in front of the mirror, it will reflect. If it's not there, there's no reflection. If you put something in front of the mirror, it's there. Consciousness is like a mirror. It's like a sky. It has this kind of clarity. I think that can be understood, but it has something else. It knows. It has a kind of knowing. And by knowing, I don't mean knowing correctly, an awareness. What distinguishes us from inanimate objects is this ability to know. We remember what happened yesterday. A table can't remember what happened yesterday. We remember what happened yesterday, right? Because we know, we're aware. Oh yes, I saw this, I did this, I did that. There is this knowing, this cognition, this cognitive aspect. So this cognition and this clarity together is what make up, is the basic qualities of mind. So I think that if we want to develop some kind of trust or belief, which is one of the types of faith, then it can only be done really on examining what is called in Tibetan the Shi, the basic reality. It says in Buddhism, it says that all reasoning is based on what's in front of you. Right? It's not that reasoning does not happen in some vacuum and some ivory tower somewhere. It happens right in front of you. You start with what you've got. There are Tibetan talks about 4 types of reasoning, and actually reasoning. An entrance to reason, there are 4 principles. And one of them is the principle of naturalness, naturalness. Cause and effect is a law. It's a natural law. If you plant this seed and you water it, it grows. If there is smoke, there is fire. There's this kind of natural, and nobody asks, why does this happen? If you go too far with your analysis and say, yeah, but there's cause and effect, but why? Then really you're on a hiding to nothing, because it's just natural. That's what it is. The nature of the mind is that it's clear and it knows. That's what it is. That's what you work with. That's what you work with. You start with that nature, the natural laws of the universe, of our mind. That's the starting point for any kind. Impermanence is another one. Things change from minute to minute, day to day, hour to hour. They change. Why? Cause, effect, circumstances bring about a change. That is what impermanence is. That's what impermanence is. Impermanence means changing constantly through the force of previous causes or whatever. But it is a natural law, So you work with that. And so with this basic reality, you start there. And on that, it is possible to understand how the mind, this consciousness of clarity and knowing, can develop into how it can continue. But also, it can develop and become greater than it is. We can become kinder people. We can become more compassionate. We can know more. We can become wiser. Why? Why is that? Well, it's the same reason as anything else. If the causes are there, the effects will be there. Whether you talk about karma or just cause and effect, it doesn't matter. If you plant the seeds, it will grow. In your mind, if you develop causes of compassion, seeing others, as equal and in need and so forth, and seeing how ridiculous it is to think of me all the time, then this leads to a development of compassion. Well, why is that? How is that possible? It's natural. It's natural. The Dalai Lama, when he teaches, he doesn't talk about karma and Buddhist stuff. He talks about the innate compassion that's in every human being and not every living being. Innate, it's innate. He talks about the biological factor. This starts with your mother. The mother's physical contact with the child is love, and as that, the more that the child has, the more it will benefit, and the more it grows, and the better child it will develop, and the better adult it will become because of the love of in childhood. This is natural. Not everyone is kind, I know that, but on a general level, there is a natural kind of love, innate compassion, isn't there? I mean, everybody praises compassion. Everyone loves. In this country, we had an old man who was 101. He was called Tom. Linda will know. Tom Moore, Captain Tom, wasn't he? Captain Tom. He was 101, and he could barely walk. And he, in the COVID, in the lockdown, he walked with a Zimmer frame around his house. How many times did he do it? I can't remember. He walked and walked and walked to raise money. I think he raised millions, and he was, songs, or he even got a #1 hit, for crying out loud. He recorded a song, "You'll Never Walk Alone," with somebody, and it went to #1. He was 101, and everybody loved him, and he was knighted. He was promoted to, no, I think he was promoted to captain. He was promoted, even though he'd long retired from the army. He was promoted. He was a military man. He was promoted to captain. And then, unfortunately, he died. He just died a few days ago. And the whole country plunged into sort of grief and now calls for, why is that? Because he's kind. It was his compassion. We naturally we praise compassion. Anyone who's kind or compassionate, it gets praised. It's natural within us. Even in the most unpleasant people will always respond to kindness. Naturalness always talks about dogs responding to kindness. It's true. Absolutely true. Believe me, I live in India. I know about dogs. My God, some of them. But if you treat them with kindness, they love it. They wag their tails. Anyway, so why am I talking about this? Yes, it is possible. It's possible for the mind to develop, and more important, to develop limitlessly. Why? Because if you think about compassion, for example, what is to stop you developing compassion until it encompasses every living being? What is there to stop you from completely exchanging yourself with others, so that you are no longer the center of attention, and everyone else is far more? What is there? What stops you? Nothing. The only thing that stops us is our own me, our own sense of limitations. Those minds, they're wrong. If you take anger, for example, anger can't be developed. Limits. You can't just get so, well, maybe you can, I don't know. But it seems even anger and hatred, and all they're limited. You get to a certain point, then you either die of a heart attack, or whereas compassion is limitless. Dharmakirti, in his Brahmanavataka, talks about this. He spends a lot of time proving that compassion can be developed limitlessly. with no limit to compassion. What is there to stop it? Think about that. He says, for example, it's not like jumping. He talks about jump dharma kuti. So you can jump high, but there's a limit, right? I mean, the record for the high jump, I don't know what it is. What, 10 foot is it? I mean, you're not going to get a high jumper jumping 100 feet, are you? I mean, maybe you will, I don't know. You're not going to get a runner faster than Usain Bolt running the 100 meters in 2 or 3 seconds. It's impossible. He says, well, like that, you know, some minds are like that, but compassion is not. Also, what about knowing? What is it that stops us from knowing things? What is it that stops us from knowing? Why don't we know something? It's an interesting sort of process. Next time you know something, I used to do crosswords. I love crosswords. And you stare at a puzzle and you think, can't work it out. Or sometimes in my translation, I do some translation and I cannot work it out. And as I look at it, it doesn't communicate its meaning to me. It's not, nothing is coming from the page and I'm not getting. And then suddenly I learn it, I know it. What has changed? What's changed? The translation hasn't changed. It didn't make itself easier. Something is lifted. Veils have been lifted from my not knowing to become knowing. So in that sense, that gradual lifting of unknowing, it too is limitless. Why should it be limited? It's only limited by our own ignorance. Ignorance is destroyed by wisdom in the same way that no matter how dark the room is, if you turn on the light, the brighter the light, the more the darkness will go. There's no way that darkness can overcome that light. If you turn on the light, it will destroy the darkness. But understand, if you think about that, then you can see how it's possible that I can become enlightened being. And even possible to see that how as an enlightened being, I can speak to all living beings at the same time in every language. It is possible to see that. That's faith. You know, that kind of knowing and that kind of not knowing, but that kind of inferring. You know, Dharmakirti says there are 2 ways of knowing, right? There's, you know, direct experience and knowing through inference, knowing through reasoning, understanding, knowing by thinking. That second kind of knowing is valid if the whole logical process is valid. Now, we use it all the time. If I was to ask you, do you have a great grandmother? Or did you have? You would immediately say yes, right? You wouldn't say no, because I've never seen her. I've never seen a photo. No. You absolutely know that you have one or you had one. Why? Because I have a mother and she had a mother and you work it out, right? You infer through the process of reasoning that there is such a thing as my great grandmother. And so therefore, I have one. We use that. We use it a lot. Sometimes the reasoning has to have a little bit of trust in it. There is a reasoning on trust. Now, if I asked you what your birthday was, and you tell me instantly, and I said to you, well, yeah, but how do you know? Do you remember coming out of the womb, looking up at the calendar? And say, oh, goodness, look at that. No, I don't think so. How do you know? Well, you say my parents and the doctor, I don't think they have any reasons to. There's a sort of a trust element there, isn't it? I mean, of course, it's not actually, strictly always accurate, is it? My father, for years, thought that he was born on February the 7th. And then he had to get his birth. He was from Ireland. And Ireland, they're very kind of, laid back about this kind of thing. He didn't have a birth certificate, but he had to get one for a new job. And he found out he was born on February the 14th, just tomorrow. Oh. So he was 1 week younger. How about that? It's not always going to be strictly sort of reliable, but there is, anyway. So through this, I think it's possible. There's another kind of faith, which is known as the sort of faith of joy and clarity. There's a word in Tibetan. It has two meanings. One means joy, joyful, happy, and the other one means clear. The other meaning is clear, and that they kind of go together. And what this means is compared to water that has been purified of all its sort of impurities and is now clear. So like that, the mind is clear. The mind is not troubled. There's no trouble in the mind, but the mind is joyful and clear. I remember once I was in France and I went to a Christian monastery, and they were doing I don't come out even song. Is it the songs in the evening? I can't what's it called, even song. And they were singing these Gregorian chants, and there was one monk, and his face was completely blissed out. He had this sort of blissful sort of look on his face, so much so the Tibetan I was with pointed it out. And that is a kind of faith of joy, and in Tibetan is also possible, but it has to be done from seeing that the qualities of what it is your faith about. If you see, if you really truly know that an enlightened mind is possible, that the truth of cessation is something that can be actualized, and that I have a mind, and that my mind can develop into those qualities, then it's a joyful thing. It's a joyful thing. It's a happy thing. And the mind at that moment is clear. Clear means clear of doubt. And there's no, what about this? Well, yeah, but yes, but, there's no dark night of the soul in Buddhism. There shouldn't be. There's a Christian thing where you talk about the dark night of the soul, where you're plagued by doubts. And of course that can happen. But I don't think it needs to happen. I think there is a kind of, it all comes down to this, again, this reasoning, seeing quality. And then the next thing, if you see that, then you want to be that. You want to be that. You want to be that enlightened being. You want to be that kind, compassionate person. You don't want to be this little self-centered me all the time, which is boring and just causes me nothing but misery. I want to be kinder. I want to be more loving. I want to be wiser. I want to be more content. I want to, and I can be, because you see the possibility. Not only do you see the possibility, but you see the methods, and that is, that is the truth of the path. If we talk about the four truths of cessation, you see that cessation is possible, and the path is the method by which to attain it. You see that it's possible, and so you do something about it. The Dalai Lama said, you do all these prostrations and mandala offerings and walking around and going, oh mani padme, all that stuff, but it has to be somehow a part or a method that brings you closer to your goal of being either enlightened or attaining nirvana or whatever it is. It has to be that. And whatever tantric practice you do, and all the bells and all the sort of elaborations, all the elaborate rituals that are in Tantra, if they're not somehow methods to bring you closer and to transform your mind, then they're just, just external sort of, nice to watch. Dalai Lama said, he says, I picked up a book on Buddhism the other day. It was a coffee table book, one of these big books with pictures. So I looked through it, there are loads of photographs. And he said all the photographs were of prayer flags and Lama dancers, people with masks and protectors and bells and dojis. He said, this isn't Buddhism. That's not Buddhism. Buddhism is transforming the mind based upon knowledge. It's walking a path to a particular goal with faith. So those are three kinds of faith: the faith of belief, of trust, the faith of joy and clarity, untroubled mind, and the faith of wanting to be that. I think those three are not necessarily separate. I think they can all be, in one person's mind at the same time. I think so. I mean, it's I remember. I don't really want to get onto the subject of guru devotion because that's a whole topic. But this whole thing of seeing the guru as a Buddha too, that is also something that needs to be seriously addressed. My feeling is that.
Can I ask a question? I have a question about faith. Is it okay to ask a question now?
Yeah, sure. Is that Misha?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Mm.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about like faith in science in my case. Like to have faith in science, well, I've been thinking about it. I have to become a scientist myself. And well, for example, let's take the vaccination. Like I have many doubts about vaccination. And I have to just trust that it's a good thing, but I have controversial kind of information and my personal experiences, like flu vaccine, let's say, that I had when I had it for the first time. After that, I decided I will never have it again because I got sick. And so, but like with Buddhism, I'm drawn to Buddhism because I don't know, my personal makeup, like even like this, like the experiences I had, my dreams, like everything kind of correlates. Like all of a sudden, I find some confirmation to my intuitive kind of knowledge. So that's the. But I wouldn't say that I'm like very knowledgeable about Buddhism, but I'm just drawn because it's my personal, like confirmation of many of my personal beliefs. Yeah, that's. But like for example, you got a vaccine, which I don't want to get, and I feel there's a lot of pressure. And like, how do you have trust in vaccine? Are you a it's stuff like that?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, like you, I mean, being a kind of nerdy person who likes to think a lot, I also had a few questions about the vaccine, especially because I am long COVID. I think, well, what's it going to do to my DNA or stuff like that? Yeah. I had a few questions about that, and I did a lot of research, and I looked it up, and I think eventually, it's about weighing up. Yes, I don't have all the answers. I don't. But I mean, I know I said you shouldn't take a leap of faith earlier on, but I think sometimes you might have to take a little leap of faith. But that leap of faith is based upon, in my understanding, the kind of overwhelming, not necessarily evidence of it being sort of perfectly safe, but the lack of evidence of it being harmful. And so, yes, of course. I mean, I remember when I went, I was a little bit, okay. But no, I made a decision. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. After all, if it doesn't work, and if I turn into a vegetable, okay, so be it. But I'm going to do it because I think you're never going to get, 100% certainty on anything. There's always going to be this, and unfortunately, in life, that is, that's what happens. You have to sort of make I made that decision. I mean, I'm still alive. It's been a week now. Look at me. Woohoo. You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
I
that's
don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I'll start to sort of doing funny things later on. I mean, it takes 2 weeks to kick in, right? Um,
Mhm.
but
Yeah. Then the long-term effect, I don't know. Well, I don't want to. But just the thoughts that I have, despite myself, and like I would do it only to comply. Like I have to, but deep inside, I it's just like this is a foreign chemical that's gonna, I'm working on my, for me, like immune system. That's what I should focus on. And I'm like, this is natural. This is this, and then this is chemical. Well, just despite myself, because of my upbringing, whatever it is, but I don't have.
I know, I know,
I have to.
I understand that.
Yeah, but it's
I
like it's a deeper question about just faith. Like for me, like with everything, it's like how. Yeah.
yeah, I understand that. I think it's a little bit like the faith of trust. You know that I mentioned earlier on. You know, to be more technical about that. You know, the faith of trust, in order to have sort of some sort of like knowing or believing that you were born on a certain day, your birthday. Um, there has to be certain. It's not just any old faith. It's factors that that there is nothing that harms that. Okay, you know there is no. I mean, in Buddhist faith, they talk about not being harmed by scripture, not being harmed by reasoning. You know, there's nothing that damages that faith. You know, there's no reason for my parents to lie. Why would they lie? They're good people. There's no reason for the doctor to make a mistake. I mean, there are a lot of things. So I think, you know, for me, basically, it did come down to having faith in medical science. You know, that's what it came down to. I think, well, I've got to go, you know, that there's something bigger than me. And I think medical science is much bigger than me. And yes, it's not 100%, but I think, you know, you have to, well, I had to make a choice. I mean, I could have said, well, I've had COVID, I'll never get it again. But I mean, that isn't, you know, that isn't good reasoning too. So, yeah,
People have faith in
I
miracles.
feel that it's,
They look down. They don't have faith inside. Like I more believe like in destiny and miracles and in my predestination. And I don't know, like if I were meant to die from COVID, and then people have different views of death, and for some death is, well, it happens, it's a liberation, and it's my karma to go to the next level. But there, yeah,
yeah, I mean, yes, you know, Tibetan Buddhism has found its way into sort of the marketplace in the Western world. It's in every bookshop. You can pick up a book on profound Tantra, you can read it. You know, even the word karma is currency, isn't it? These, oh, it's karma, it's your karma, this karma, you know, it's all over the place, you know. But I suspect that, you know, these are not given much thought. I mean, I, I think we need to give things great thought. But you're right, we can't know everything. We can't know everything, at least right now. But we can infer sort of, you know, one of the reason of trust is that, for example, if in Tantra, the deity is described, and in the third hand on the right, he is holding a hammer. And you say, well, how do I know he's holding a hammer? I don't know he's holding a hammer. You know, I've never seen this deity, you know, or that there is on this path you will experience this or that or this. You know, it's impossible to know. But the thing is that what's important to understand is that if the Buddha was right about the main stuff, i.e., the four truths and the two truths, if he's right about those, the main stuff, then the other stuff, which is not the main stuff, you kind of think, well, okay, I don't know that, but I will trust in the same way as I trust my mother and my father. I know them, you know. And if someone comes in, my father or my mother or someone I really trust comes in and says, oh, it's raining outside, I wouldn't go and check and say, well, I don't know that. I haven't experienced the rain. I don't believe you. Therefore, I will check. I mean, you wouldn't have many friends left, would you? No, because there comes a time when there is trust. There is trust on
Well, like
certain things.
I trust that.
But there are some things on which you should not take on trust. And that is understanding the two truths and the four truths, the nature of the mind. These things should not be taken on trust. They should be understood, in my opinion, they should be understood through contemplation.
So there are a couple of other questions. Are you willing to take some other questions? There's one question. How can we infer that the subtle consciousness continues and is not dependent on the gross body?
How can we infer that it continues? Well, the subtle consciousness is something that, if you strip away all the sensory consciousnesses, they come and they go. They're not always there, they're not, but there is a continuum. There is a continuum. Now, at the time of death, when you slip into some kind of unconsciousness, right? Like sleep. According to Buddhism, you'll do that, but then what happens is you awaken into a kind of what is known as a death clear light. That death clear light is a subtle consciousness. It's a subtle mind, right? And it is something that if you're a great tantric practitioner, you can work with. Otherwise, it passes you by. The sensory consciousnesses have to depend upon a sense organ, which is physical, which is this realm, not this body, and so forth. Otherwise, you can't see, you can't hear, you can't smell, you can't taste, and you can't touch. But even in dreams, you think of dreams. In a dream, kinds of stuff happens, right? You travel to other things that have no bearing on this body, no bearing on reality, as far as we know, this kind of ordinary reality. But that happens. That mind is there. Even when you sit and think about things, and you think about things and you try and meditate or you contemplate things, and you might get some kind of insight or some kind of understanding. How is that dependent upon the body? And this question came up a lot in the Dalai Lama's meetings with scientists, and the book that I'm translating right at the moment is about that. Records those, and and he goes into a great deal about how it may be possible, of course, that sounds and sights travel along neuronal pathways. That's a new word I've learned, by the way, neuronal pathways, and so forth. But the sort of more profound thoughts and thinking where you, where you try and understand something and you see things, and even in dreams and so forth, I don't think personally, that these necessarily depend upon a physical base. I mean, Buddhism talks about formless realms, right, where there is no form. So, but again, that's it's a question of belief. I think the subtle mind is as I say, is something that we don't have any experience of, except at death. Then we'll experience it. Then you find out. So maybe we should, when we die, we'll know, but then it's too late. Sorry, is there any other questions?
Yeah, somebody asked, what is the Tibetan word for clear, joyful mind?
What is the Tibetan word for what?
clear, joyful mind.
Dhamma deba. The word, the faith, that particular kind of faith, the word for faith in Tibetan is deba, deba. And there's yicheki deba, dhamma deba, ngunduki deba, dhamma. Dhamma means, dhamma in Tibetan also means if someone asks you to do something and you say, yeah, sure, I'll do it, that's called dhamma. You're happy to do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Someone asks you to do the washing up. You say, yeah, I'll do the washing up. I'll hoover the floor. I'll do the shopping. That's dhamma. That's dhamma. But if it's like, you know, that's that. So this dhamma is a happiness. It's a joy, and there's no. That's what it is. But it also has this other meaning of being clear and transparent. It has a dual meaning. You know, the word in Tibetan, and there is some problem with this word. It seems to be spelt in a different way, but it's dhamma. Who asked that? Amy? Oh, Diane.
Diane.
Okay. Yeah, dhamma deba, yicheki deba, ngunduki deba. This is deba. The word deba has, even in Tibetan, has some kind of connection with wanting, you know. It's you want to be like, you know, you want to achieve something. I think, the problem with our relation with faith is that maybe it's based upon Christian belief of sort of, which seems to be quite sort of blind, you know, God did this and so on. And we are taught to be skeptical, which of course is good. It's good to be skeptical, but not to the point where you dismiss something without even giving it a chance. You know, if you just kick it out and say, well, you know, or as Naturalness says, sometimes people don't like things like compassion because it's religious. You know, people don't. They're suspicious of anything that smacks of religion, which is why, you know, he often will only talk about secular ethics and not religious ethics. So, but I think, I don't see. I wish I had more faith. I think faith is wonderful. You can see it in India on some of the faces, not Buddhists, but in Hindu, the sadhu. There's a wonderful photograph I got it on my screensaver of this woman in Tamil Nadu. Face. Faith is like, you know, that monk, you know, I told you about. It expressed physically. It's a kind of joy. It's a happiness that. How can it not be good for you? It's not being gullible, okay? It's not being gullible. It's not. No one's asking anyone to sort of believe, you know, without sort of, being sure. And Dalai Lama himself says, he says, in the past, you know, maybe religion was kind of foisted on people with fear. You know, they threatened you. It was sort of you were made to believe through fear. If you don't believe you're going to go to hell, there's this kind of thing. That's wrong. Absolutely wrong. He tells the story, doesn't he, where he went to, there was a monk who went to a monastery. He was looking for the abbot, and he meets this monk, and he says, oh, where's the abbot? So you're around, the monk said, no, he's gone out scaring the people. There's sort of a joke about, you know, how, we try and we almost cajole and cower people and threaten and sort of force people into believing. That's wrong. That's completely wrong. No joy in that, is there? So it's not gullibility to be faithful. It's not at all gullible. It's based on knowing, Anything else?
Yeah, more questions.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so Tantra can be helpful, but isn't necessary. And especially if one is not ready, doesn't yet have a foundation for Tantra. Can it do more harm than good?
Joy, that from you? Tantra can be helpful, but it's necessary. No, it is not necessary, especially if one not ready. Can do more harm than good. Absolutely, absolutely. Tantra. I mean, according to the Buddhist practice, if you practice it along the path, it takes aeons and aeons and aeons to sort of transform your mind into something that approaches the enlightened state. And in Mahayana path, this transformation is not just self-centered, it is for all beings, as many as possible. And so you look for something quicker than that. And Tantra is quicker, right? Just as anything else. If you're traveling in a car to London and you're in a rush and there's a shortcut, you take the shortcut. It might be a bit more dangerous, but you take a shortcut over the hill or something. It is quicker. That's one reason. That reason is compassion. You can't bear to, you can't bear not to sort of become enlightened in order to help being. So you enter Tantra. That's one reason for Tantra. That's one reason for Tantra. In that sense, it is helpful. It's very helpful. And in that sense, it is necessary. But as you so rightly say, if you don't have the foundation for it, it can be quite dangerous. What is the foundation? Well, the foundation, according to Lama Tsongkhapa, you should have a mind completely trained in bodhicitta. But these days, people say, well, at least you have some aspiration, to have some kind of aspiration to developing compassion and bodhicitta. And also, I really think, and Dalai Lama says this many times, you need an understanding of dependent origination. You need a kind of understanding of emptiness. It can be Majjhamaka emptiness, it can be Chittamatra, mind-only emptiness, but you need something. Otherwise, it won't work. I deluded Gavin sitting here visualizing himself as a deity. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not possible for this deluded being permanently there in charge of everything to suddenly become, it doesn't work. It has to be practiced upon an understanding, not necessarily a perception of emptiness. Perceiving emptiness and understanding emptiness are different. Not necessarily perceiving it, but at least understanding dependent arising. And on that basis, all Tantra starts, from the sphere of emptiness I arise. What is that emptiness? It's not some kind of nothingness, some kind of black hole and whoosh, you arise. It's not that, it is an understanding of the nature. We haven't spoken about dependent arising and emptiness here. I'm assuming that most of you know about it, but I mean, from the understanding of knowing that I, as a practitioner, or I, as a human being, may appear in a particular way when I think of myself, me, but ultimately, chai aya. Thank you. Oh, garam chai. And maybe it appears that way, but the knowledge, and it's a sort of, Tibetan texts talk about remembering emptiness. They use this word, remember, or not remember, recollect, remember, recollect, bring it to mind. They don't say perceive it. You bring it to mind. They say compassion should be grasped by emptiness. it means that in the back of your mind, whatever you're doing, all this sort of visualization with changing into this and that, at the back of your mind, you have to have an understanding of dependent arising, and that how these things exist, not necessarily in the way they appear. Without that, Tantra is very difficult. So method and wisdom, they talk about method and wisdom. And so if that sense, if you've got that, then you have a foundation. But yes, can it do more harm than good? Yeah, yes, I think it can. I mean, there's been a lot of stories about people who practice Tantra are not ready. And yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's kind of difficult. Tantra is difficult. Snake in a tube. Who wants to be a snake in a tube? I mean, it's quite, it's something else, Tantra. It's sort of the philosophy of Tantra is something else. I mean, after you finish the Geisha studies in the monasteries, you should spend at least 2 years in the Tantric college. You don't go in the Tantric college and do rituals no, you study Tantra. You study how the primordial consciousness can be a direct cause for the Dharmakaya of the enlightened mind of the Buddha. You understand how the practices of the visualizations and so forth, which gradually can turn into the illusory body, that they are causes for the Sambhogakaya, the form body of the Buddha. You understand all those. I mean, the philosophy of Tantra is far out, if I may use that archaic 60s expression. It is fantastic, but it's not, yeah, you're right. It can be a little dangerous, I reckon. I don't know. I have no experience in these things. I'm just a translator. Yeah. Anything else?
Yes, more questions. How do these 3 kinds of faith relate to Tantra?
Well, I suppose, Nagarjuna said in Precious Garland, the root of Buddhism, what did he say? The root of Buddhism is faith and wisdom. Of these 2, wisdom is the most important. Wisdom is most important. Why did he say that? Because with the wisdom, then your faith will not become blind faith. It'll become a sort of a knowing faith. Now, of course, when you enter into Tantra, you are being asked to believe that Yamataka or Manjushri is the wisdom of the omniscient mind of the Buddha made flesh. That's what it is described as. It is the personification of Buddha's wisdom. Tara is the personification of Buddha's activity. Charity is the personification of Buddha's compassion, and so on. Now, these deities, these yidams, that you sort of take on as your kind of goal, you have to know how they are possibly the personification of the omniscient mind. And that goes back to this, what I talked about earlier, the faith of knowing how it's possible to become and to develop something of Dharmakaya. You know the word Dharmakaya, the enlightened mind of the Buddha with the 10 powers and all these, And if you don't understand that, then a Tantra is just sort of pretty pictures, with sort of slightly frightening deities. His Holiness says, he said the other day, we were talking about He's all about wrathful deities. He said, sometimes I wonder what they're wrathful at. He says, sometimes I wonder what they're, why. He says, sometimes I look at wrathful deities, I see them smiling. And he tells a story of some Japanese tourist who came to see him and told him how he went into temples in Tibet, in these dark protector chapels, you know, full of these protectors with their fangs and their bulging eyes and their weapons. And he said he felt terrified. But the Dalai Lama says, you know, Buddhism is not there to hurt you. He says, no one who practices bodhicitta or wisdom will ever be hurt. Right? That's so important. That comes from faith, knowing. Knowing. I mean, it says Yamantaka is so ferocious that all the other deities, when they see him, they drop all their weapons. You know, Rinpoche said that. They're so terrified, they drop everything. I'm not sure how to understand that, but in the, what was the question again? Oh, faith, yeah. How does faith? Yeah, absolutely. I think faith is at the basis. As Nagarjuna said, it's at the absolute base, absolute root. If without faith, I mean, the Dalai Lama, when he teaches in the West, he teaches secular Buddhism, secular ethics, not secular Buddhism, secular ethics, in which he talks about taking out the sort of knowable sort of phenomena from the Nalanda masters, the understanding of dependent arising, impermanence, the four truths, the innate compassion within us, the understanding of the basic reality, completely devoid of faith. He divides Buddhism up into sort of three. He talks about the tenets, the philosophy. He talks about the basic reality, and he talks about the rituals and the practices. That the last one you can forget about. So I think for where he is going with this is that for non-Buddhists, he's not asking them to have faith. He's not asking them to have faith. He's asking them to think, to know. Forget the faith side of things. Don't worry about that. We're just, dependent arising and emptiness is said to be a slightly hidden phenomenon. Three types of phenomenon. There's that which are evident, like things in front of your eyes and the ears. Anyway, they're accessible by the sense organs. There's something which is hidden, but it's only slightly hidden. Emptiness is only slightly hidden, i.e., it can be known. It can be known. Yeah. I'm getting a little tired. I still have this, but anyway, what else have we got here? What is the difference between...
Go ahead.
Yeah, modern science often goes hand in hand with commercialism. I hope he gets back to what he's going to say about good devotion. Yeah, next time. What is the difference between faith in wanting and the contradiction in the desire to become enlightened, or the desire to be free from desires? Desire to be free from desires. The difference between faith in wanting and the contradiction in desire to become enlightened. I don't quite get that, but I think what you're saying is that in Tibetan there are two types. There are two different words for wanting. There's one word which means just to want. I want to be of help to other beings. The definition of bodhicitta is wanting to become enlightened. You want. It's a desire, right? There's that want. The other kind of word, which is dhecha, is a kind of desire in which something appears to be attractive to you, and you want to possess it and have it because you think it's going to bring you some kind of happiness, and it's all based around as some kind of belief that there is some kind of I here that needs to be pampered and looked after occasionally. And so they're two different, they're two different. Maybe in English we have one word, desire, or want, I don't know, but no, the wanting to be free from suffering is good. No, I mean, I want to be free from this bloody illness. I mean, it's perfectly all right to want to be free. There's nothing wrong with that kind of wanting. But the nature of wanting, it has to be, does what you want appear to be suddenly real and solid? And then when you can always check if you want something in a shop and then you buy it, see how your attitude towards it changes. When you want it, it's an object of desire. When you get it, it's mine. It belongs to me, it's mine, And so these kind of appearances of mine and I want this, these things should be examined. And if they are faulty insofar as the way these things appear is not the way they exist, then that kind of desire is faulty too. And if the desire is faulty, it cannot really lead to any kind of happiness. Whereas wanting to be a benefit to others and wanting to gain qualities in order to sort of somehow be a benefit to others is not necessarily that kind of wanting. But I mean, I'm hesitating here because clearly, I think there's some kind of compassion is a bit mixed with sort of attachment and sort of even guilt. There's a kind of guilty compassion, isn't there? Where you want to do something because you think you ought to. You've never done anything with your life, and I did this and all. Something colonial guilt, we call it in England. how we mistreated the poor Scots people. Where are you, Linda? There's a good colonial guilt, and you want to. I think we need to separate. This is where this, as I said before, your mind should be grasped by wisdom. You should know the difference between these different types of wanting. Having bodhicitta is not to make yourself into some kind of doormat where people walk all over you. It's not that. It's not that. It's a noble mind. It's a high, exalted state of being which encompasses a large, something larger than yourself. It is a sort of Nelson Mandela type of mind, that kind of mind, that sort of, willingly sacrificing yourself for the sake of others, is that kind of wanting. No, it's the difference, I think. I don't know.
So, Gavin, if you're tired, would you like to call it a day now?
I don't know. It's up to you.
Get over exhausted. Well, it's really more.
I've got a cup of tea now. I feel okay.
All right. Please let us know.
Have a look at just some of the questions. How many more questions are there? Oh God, there's hundreds. Can we stop? Can we stop? Is that a question?
No, I think we should stop at 12 o'clock. I'm sorry. I'm starting to get sad that you're not feeling well and we're continuing.
I'm okay. No. Don't worry about that. If you are tired, we should stop. Faith and devotion. We can answer these next time. Is there a way of saving these questions? Do you know?
Yes, we can save the chat.
Huh?
We can save the chat and return next time.
Yeah, because next time I want to talk about how Buddhism is based on reality. And I want to talk about the two truths. I want to talk about impermanence. And I want to talk about things. Yeah. And I want to talk about the path and Tantra. So there's a lot to talk about, But no, I'm okay. I'm not. Sometimes when I talk, I notice when I'm on the phone, for some reason on the phone, I always shout. I don't know why. And I find that it's kind of, my breath gets sort of labored a bit, it's, but it isn't, it isn't any big deal. I don't think. It's just a sort of about this time of day, which is 5 o'clock in England. I always, when the day changes to the night, everything in me changes. I don't know if you get this, but I become a kind of a different, I become a couch potato after 6 o'clock. Do you know what a couch potato is?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that in America?
Yes.
Oh, you're all couch potatoes in America, right? Well, I'm a bit of a couch potato too. So on that note, thank you very much. And I'm sorry if I went on a bit. Please, next time, ask as many questions as you like.
Okay, sounds good.
Can I go now?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Gavin.
that
See you next week.
Okay. Everybody, see you next week.
Okay, Sneh. Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
rest up,
Bye.
feel better.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Amy. Be good.